Since 1964, the Piedmont Beautification Foundation has partnered with the City of Piedmont to enhance our public spaces and create beautiful community amenities. In celebration of their 60th anniversary, we collaborated with PBF to document a series of informal talks showcasing PBF-funded projects throughout the city, presented in partnership with the popular Walking on Wednesdays program. From the Japanese Tea House in Piedmont Park to Crocker Park's beloved Bufano Bears, to landscaped gathering spaces in neighborhoods throughout the city, PBF's contributions are a vital part of Piedmont's built environment and bring joy to community members day after day, week after week, year after year. I hope you enjoy hearing the stories behind these projects as much as I did.
Hi, I'm Patty Siskin, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the Linda-Kingston Triangle, where we are stopping today, and a little bit about the lantern on Grand Avenue, where we will not be stopping. But this park was built in 2016. The neighbors had complained it was a very dark area. It was a huge intersection, and they said kids were not safe going to beach school. So they wanted it improved. Also, during the time that all these homes were built, the plan was just to have the water run off and go to the streets and then down to Lake Merritt. So we started with the concept of doing bioswales on the side, capturing some of the water, and hopefully raising the ground level of water. Nancy Kent was the one that did our landscaping. It was a combined project. The neighbors pitched in, the Piedmont Beautification pitched in, and also I think I was chair of the Park Commission. They were involved with the ceremony and everything that happened. The two benches that were built here, one over here is in honor of Mark Feldkamp, who was our Parks and Project Director when this was built, and I'm happy to say my family donated this bench for me. So, yeah. Yes. Well, the other thing that's been wonderful, we've gotten such positive feedback about this, is the neighbors put up, we put in these small lamps so they would just light up this area and not bother the residents. So they put up Christmas wreaths, and I see them out here with bridge tables, and they have their neighborhood meetings here. So it's been a wonderful addition to the neighborhood. For the lantern on Grand Avenue, which is just down from Fairview, it was a very dangerous intersection, and there'd been car crashes and a lot of accidents there. So they wanted, and also the lantern on Grand Avenue was tilting. So in 2013, we decided to renovate it. It was the 100-year anniversary of when it was built. Initially it was lit, and then during the years that it was attended to, but not well, they poured concrete in the interior. So then that kind of prohibited future lighting. But again, the neighbors, PBF, and the Garden Club all contributed money and developed it and did the landscaping. And since then, they've added, the bollards and the directional drive, arrows, which have been very helpful in keeping that location much safer.
My name is Nick Milosevic. I am the Public Works Supervisor of Maintenance Department. I've been working in this triangle for over 17 years. This is known as the Marinelli Memorial Grove nowadays, and also known as the Dave Frankel Grove. My predecessor, actually his first job here, he planted these trees. Yeah, so these trees were planted in 1988. 1988, so we're looking at 37 years now, and it was done through the Park Commission with the help of the PBF. Before that, it was a grove of junipers, and if anyone knows about junipers, that was probably a 1960s to 70s plant that everyone liked to plant. Junipers are good for nothing except to house creepy crawlers and snakes and rats. So they took those out, planted these 8 trees. All these trees went in as 24-inch box trees. So you can see how much they've grown over the years. And when they went in, they went with azaleas and rhododendrons underneath because they do well underneath the redwood trees. With redwood trees, what happens is the root system will start, we say they're holding hands because they start to interlock. So with a grove of redwood trees, you don't ever want to plant one redwood tree. You want to have 3 to 4 just because they help each other, support each other. So that's what's going on with these trees. You can see the azaleas are kind of in decline. There's no more rhododendrons, and what has happened is the root system of these redwood trees have actually choked out the plants that were underneath here. So the trees are actually thriving right now, which is a good thing. But the rhododendrons and the azaleas are unfortunately in decline right now.
I'm Molly Ashford, and I'm a member of the Piedmont Garden Club, and we work with the Piedmont Beautification Fund and helping to improve sites. Prior to the celebration, the neighbors came to the Park Commission, which was then chaired by Patty Siskind, and presented their case for improvement of the intersection. They felt the crosswalk was too wide and traffic coming off Moraga was dangerously fast. The neighbors wanted to improve the area because children used this as a route to school in the morning. The neighbors had already raised some money for improvements. They wanted the city to know they were not only behind the development, but willing to put money into the project. Once the city felt they had neighborhood support, Piedmont Beautification Foundation ran a spring campaign to raise money for the development of the park. Mark Feldkamp was the Parks and Project Manager with the city at the time, and it was determined that a small park projecting out from 109 Ronada would slow down the traffic with an installation of a park and stop sign. The plant selection was made for drought-tolerant plants, and the masonry work was done by Rick DeCovey. I live up the street. I've had the pleasure of watching the plants grow and mature beautifully. Though in the middle of a busy street, it is also a bit of a sanctuary, and particularly during COVID, I had many outdoor chats on this bench.
Welcome, Wednesday walkers. I'm so happy that you're here. This is one of my favorite parks. I'm Nancy Kent, and I'm the Parks and Project Manager. This park was originally part of a land purchase by William Blair, and he and his brothers established a dairy early in Piedmont. And one of the things he noticed is that the roads were really dusty and made his deliveries hard. So he actually was fortunate enough to own this property that had a basalt outcrop. So he decided that he was going to use the quarry material and pave roads in Oakland and Piedmont to facilitate his deliveries. So that's why you're looking right now, if you look at the steep walls of Dracena, what we call the quarry area, that was all done as part of an excavation to provide road beds for streets in Piedmont and Oakland. So then in 1890, he had excavation work. Their excavation work hit the underground stream. We have old maps that show that the ravine that you walk through, the off-leash area, was actually a creek at one time. So they hit the underground stream, the excavated quarry fills up, and it becomes a lake. And we think that that stayed in play as a lake till probably the early 1920s. In 1903, the land actually was sold to Frank Havens, another name that you would be familiar with, and it remained as a natural site for probably 20 years. And so I think what you would have seen there would have been a lake with some waterfowl, some whatever native plants or plants that could actually survive undisturbed in sort of a native setting. But it was actually 1916, Piedmont residents floated a bond and they purchased the land to develop it as a park. So in the early 20s, the city used the park actually as one of its first corporation yards. So there was some fill, but still a smaller pond, a greenhouse, and then of course all the park equipment was held there. In the early 20s, then they decided that they would actually fill the lake There's great stories about all the things that went on when you actually have a natural lake in a town and you have young kids that want to go and explore. So once the lake was filled in, it remained as a natural area till about 1970s. And that's when the quarry had been fenced for over 40 years. And that's when the fence went down and they did the first renovation of the park, which did include a tot lot. But what you're looking at now is the result of a second landscape architect working with funding from a bunch of donors on this landscape. So in the early 2000s, the Park Commission, the Rec Commission, and City Council were involved in multiple plans to look at how to re-envision this park. And I think why it is really important to understand public projects is that it often is a long process dealing with public outreach and dealing with gaining consensus, dealing with neighborhoods. So it's about a 2-year process. PBF, Piedmont Beautification Foundation, started fundraising for this, I think in 2003. So they did a couple-year campaign, and they were one of the significant donors that made the tot lot and these improvements go forward. Before you leave and you go up to, we walk up the ravine, there's a plaque that over here by the entrance that notes all the different donors and the Park Commission, the Rec Commission, and the City Council. And you'll recognize some of those names as people that have participated. That was in 2006. You'll recognize some of those names as people that are in different roles, politicians and park commissioners and things like that. The other thing I wanted to just notice, let you know, is that in the early 20s, volunteers, I think it was a Girl Scout troop, planted firs, pines, cedars, and redwoods. So that would make the trees about 100 years old. So those trees, those are all conifers, and so those trees would have been 100 years old today. And those are many of the species that we actually have been removing because they have died. And our arborists that we've consulted with have said that the decline of those trees is a result of the drought and also warmer and drier climates. So the city, working with PBF, has also worked on a reforestation project. You might have seen this in their brochures. The reforestation is a project that we're planting native trees, and we're also planting trees that other consultants have told us are climate adaptive. So what we want to do as a city is plant trees that are going to thrive in the next 50 to 100 years, because that's what those are how long most of our trees survive. So right behind me, or right over here, that's one of the plantings. We had Doug fir trees there. They both died. You can see the stumps that are there. And we replanted with the native big leaf maple, which is also, I'm pretty sure the tree that's deciduous is also a big leaf maple. So that's one of the deciduous California natives. Another tree that we're really excited about is the island oak, the Quercus tomentella, and that has been planted right behind me as another donation tree. That's a tree that's native to I think it's the Canary Islands. It's a California native, and it's considered the oak that's going to be the most adaptive as our climates get warmer and warmer. It came to the city originally through a Boy Scout project, and the inspiration was that one of the families that lives nearby, the Beckers, their kids would play in the park and use the old abutments from the bridge that was here prior to 1960s as a way of telling stories and using it as a podium. So through a lot of hard work and a lot of generous donations, This bridge evolved from a less formal design to actually a design that I think really replicates what was here and built, we think, in around the 30s. So there was a bridge here in 1930. We think it was removed in the 60s, and it was a wood trestle kind of design bridge. So this bridge was designed, and a lot of the construction details were designed by the Mark Becker's design firm, and his son Cole Becker used this and also planted redwoods in the park as part of his Eagle Scout project. So this is one of the old abutments. We couldn't reuse it because we needed new structural requirements. So instead, these were the stone abutments that were reused.
I've been advising PBF for about 40 years now, so seen quite a bit of the history. Interestingly enough, there was a tea house built right on this spot in 1907 by Frank C. Havens. He also built a pavilion, very rustic looking. Later on, when the community hall and the Exedra were developed more in the Spanish motif, that tea house was torn down and demolished. In 1974, the school district determined to build a new junior high school, and owning part of the property that the school was going to be located on was a family named Redmond that had been there many years, a very elaborate estate, and this tea house was in their backyard. The school board offered the city the opportunity to have the tea house if they could find something to do with it. At the time, my mother, Jean Brown Wolfe, was pretty much active in, I think she might have been the chair of the Planning Commission at the time, or excuse me, Park Commission. Anyway, she thought it was a great idea, as did the other leaders at Piedmont Beautification Foundation, so they agreed to take on the project. It took about 2 years because the dedication did not happen until 1976. The tea house was put on a flatbed truck and moved from down where the junior high is now up here. It was a very dramatic day. It drew a big crowd of spectators to watch the tea house coming up here to the park. There was an elaborate Japanese-style tea given to dedicate the tea house in 1976. And it has been a fixture that makes events, weddings and so forth in the area here a very popular thing. Now I'm going to turn it over to Valerie Matzker, who, as I'm sure most of you know, was a mayor of Piedmont, but at the key time that we're going to talk about today, she was the president of PBF, and you can tell what PBF took on.
So the year before I became president of PBF, Bobby Stair was president, and in her time, they undertook a restoration of the interior of the tea house because the floor was in terrible shape. It was splintered, it was unusable, and it needed paint, it needed loving care. Those doors in the back, and I hope you'll take time to walk through a little later. We had it opened up because no one gets to see it open, and it's spectacular. So you'll notice that the artwork on the sliding panel doors is low. Any idea why the artwork would be low? Exactly. People sit on the floor at a low table, so why would you have the artwork at our eye level? Anyway, the man who did it did a fabulous job. Then, when I became president, it was clear that this deck was history. It was ready for the fireplace. And we can thank that redwood tree right there for this deck, because that redwood tree absolutely made a tinder pile of the original deck, because it came in, let's see, closer to the redwoods. The entrance was closer to the redwoods, and so our task was to, without disturbing the redwoods, to create a new deck for the tea house. And Greer Graff's architecture firm did the design. Chris Coffey, a wonderful young man, very talented architect, who passed away at age 43 from an aneurysm. Ugh. He designed these beautiful, the railings. And every time I come here, I think of Chris. But anyway, we did add on where you're standing over there. That's a completely new area. And that was put on just to make the deck more usable for events. The one back there was always there. So basically we shifted the entrance away from the redwoods, did a whole new design.
Good morning, my name's Gail Lambert, and I'm a former president of PBF during the time of COVID. So it was a very interesting time for the city and for our country. And so the inspiration for this project, it's called the Highland-Guilford Steps and Handrail Project, was hatched during the summer after COVID first started on lockdown. The city, when they could open up a little bit, mowed the lawns at the park, and we were able to be outside, and people were gathering all over the parks around Piedmont, including this area. But the winter before the shutdown for COVID, I was walking down these stairs with Ruthie McLeod, and it had been after a rainstorm. It was in February, and it was very slippery, and there was no handrail. And I don't know if you remember it, but the concrete was kind of uneven, and it had rotting railroad ties. So that was the inspiration. She said, we both said we need a handrail to kind of navigate this because it's slippery. And so she offered to donate seed money for that project. So during the summer of COVID, when we finally opened up, we met outside in the park with Chester Nakahara and Nancy Kent. And Chester was the Public Works Director at the time, and Nancy Kent is the Parks and Projects Manager. So we met and kind of conceptualized a plan about creating this plaza before there were two big hedges there, and this was the entry for the cherry tree walk to the tea house. So the first drawings were very crude. We had this first concept for the plan, which was to have this plaza with the opportunity for people to gather, and then the steps down with the handrail. And so the considerations at the time was that I was focused on safety for the city and sustainability as my project. So the stairs have a non-slip surface, and the handrails are ADA compliant with handrails on both sides for different people. The decorative handrails were kind of a mirror of the Barbara McGee overlook, so there's consistency throughout the city. There was this new lighting here going down to the tea house, which is LED lighting that is consistent with other lighting throughout the city. This small pedestrian plaza, which is the new entry to the tea house, has this green infrastructure which is composed of semi-pervious concrete. So when it rains, instead of all the water running off, a lot of it percolates into the ground, into the groundwater. So that was a new green infrastructure thing to keep water from running off quickly and into the storm drains. And then the planting, I don't know if you remember, it was a lot of ivy and kind of dead plants. The plantings were native and drought-tolerant plants, including replacing native oak trees that were dying, and then a new water-efficient drip system. And then of course the commemorative trees and benches, more cherry trees down the cherry tree walk. And I'm sure when you're here in the spring, you see what a beautiful sight it is at this entry.
My name is Sharon Hom. I'm a member of the Piedmont Beautification Foundation for over 10 years and a resident of Piedmont for 30 years. I know from looking at the Wednesday Walker website that you are very familiar with Hall Fenway as well as the key route electric key system, right. Yes. But for those who are not familiar with this history, I have a few quick remarks. By 1901, the key route electric streetcars replaced the cable car systems in Piedmont and in the East Bay. Piedmont had 3 streetcar lines, the 10, 11, and the 12. The 10 traveled through central Piedmont up this Fenway to Crocker Park. What you're walking on here, this pathway, was the right-of-way for that streetcar line. After the line was abandoned, much of the right-of-way was sold to build smaller homes. And in fact, AC Transit parked buses on it for a brief period of time.
That house's lot is so tiny.
Yes, yeah. See, so they split it off, yeah. Herbert Edwin Hall, a local resident on King Avenue, convinced the city to accept the property and convinced his neighbors to help raise the money to buy this piece of property in 1963. The Piedmont Garden Club's Civic Beautification Committee assisted with the planting according to the original plans when the land was acquired. The emphasis was placed on using native shrubs and plants. In 1964, after PBF was formed, the estate of Herbert E. Hall donated money to erect a gazebo and a bird bath here somewhere. I haven't figured out where it would have been, but it was, because it's not here any longer. If anybody knows, it'd be great information to know where the gazebo was. Anyway, the dedication of Hall Fenway took place in 1965. Hall Fenway was one of the first Piedmont beautification projects after its formation. After the initial installation of all the plantings, PBF wanted to ensure that the Hall Fenway was maintained with high quality plants. Therefore, PBF promised the city of Piedmont that it would contribute $4,000 a year towards the maintenance of the plants. That promise is kept to this day in that the Hall Fenway maintenance expense is a line item with PBF. So we are dedicated to keeping this space as beautiful as possible. What Mr. Hall wanted was he wanted it to be kind of woodsy and marshy and, a Fenway. And so they wanted native plants and shrubs. So part of what I see from the notes in 1964 is that they're surrounded by birch trees, ferns, iris, and woodsy plants. And I think the garden club, one of the members of the garden club was a park commissioner, Mrs. Herman Nichols was her name. So she was a friend of Mr. Hall's, a member of the garden club, and a park commissioner. So she helped them plan the appropriate plantings for this area.
I'm Kathy Glazer, a PBF advisor, and I'm happy to see that you've come to appreciate another of PBF's important contributions to our city. Here we have the wonderful work of internationally renowned sculptor Benny Bufano, Bear and Nursing Cubs. This sculpture was a generous gift from Jerry S. Mosier to the citizens of Piedmont. Its placement here in Crocker Park followed 4 years of negotiations between the Piedmont Beautification Foundation,
the Piedmont City Council, and the Bufano Society of the Arts. This acquisition, valued at $40,000 to $50,000 at the time it was gifted, was installed on February 11, 1980 by Rigging International, a company owned by Piedmont resident Denny McLeod. It is number 9 in a limited edition of 25 sculptures and is composed of polished ground granite weighing 2.5 tons. PBF, with Norma Wells at the helm, raised $4,700 to help with the installation and landscaping costs. Beniamino Bufano was an Italian-born modernist sculptor. He was born on October 15, 1898, and emigrated with his family to New York City in 1902. Benny later studied at the Art Students League of New York. In 1915, he moved to California and eventually became an esteemed sculptor of public art. He maintained that, quote, "Public art allows artists to give something to the world and enables their voices to be heard beyond the provincialism of their immediate locales." Bufano's work is held in collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the San Francisco Museum of Art, the DeYoung Museum, the Oakland Museum of California, and in many private collections. It can be viewed in numerous public installations in San Francisco, throughout the Bay Area, and across the country. Bufano's sculpture, Bear and Nursing Cubs, continues to bring joy to all those who visit Crocker Park. The citizens of Piedmont are grateful for both the generosity of the Mosier family and the tenacity of the Beautification Foundation for securing this public treasure. There's some wear on it, and I think that may be more a factor of kids and people climbing on it, but he is very adamant about his work being climbed on and being embraced and touched and felt, and so there's not a sign here indicating, you know, or a cordon that disallows you to come up and interact with the piece. So I think that it may have some wear and tear, but I think it's more a function of kids and adults climbing and enjoying it than it is weather.
As you have learned, PBF has a strong presence in our beautiful city. The Exedra was built as part of the 1922 Civic Center plan. It is considered the symbol of Piedmont. This site was the original location of Piedmont Springs Hotel, which opened in 1871. The hotel had 20 bedrooms and 5 dining rooms. Visitors came to take advantage of the mineral springs, which were thought to have healing properties. After the hotel burned, Frank Havens developed Piedmont Park in 1898 to continue to draw visitors and future residents to Piedmont. The popular Piedmont Park Cafe offered fine dining with linen draped tables and potted palms. Havens continued to add to the park with a Japanese tea house on the site of today's tea house. When Frank Havens died, his widow decided to sell Piedmont Park. Before the park could be sold to developers, school officials and the city, led by Wallace Alexander, purchased most of the park land. In 1922, city officials hired Albert Farr to design a master plan of the city center, with an elaborate Exedra at the entrance of the park and other additions such as the community hall. The Exedra and the community hall were dedicated in 1925. Piedmont Beautification Foundation's first renovation efforts of the Exedra began in 1972 with the blue vase triangle planting, major structural and decorative repair of the Exedra, and iron gates, as well as lighting and planting of the centerpiece. In 2000, PBF made major donations to the development of the Exedra Plaza, the backside of the blue vase by funding the design, repair, and installation of the fountain, stairway lighting, tiles, and landscaping of the area. The crowning phase added the McGee Overlook, complete with lighting of the Centennial Oak Grove. I think you will agree that not only is this one of our community's favorite gathering spots, it is also one of the most spectacular.